and the practice changed. And Allah spoke about it in the Quran, the concept of abrogation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا نَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْهَا. We do not abrogate. In the Quran, Allah makes reference to a verse of the Quran, but the same applies to a ruling in terms of fiqh. We do not abrogate anything within the Sharia, you can say. أو ننسيها نأتي بخير منها, say that we bring better than it. Things that change within the Sharia. The concept of abrogation is something which existed. Perhaps one of the most common and famous examples of abrogation was the mut'ah that was once upon a time permitted. And two types of mut'ah. There are two types of mut'ah in Islam. The mut'ah that most people are familiar with is what they translated as temporary nikah. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there was a period in the seerah, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam was traveling with the Sahaba and they were away from home for lengthy periods of time. And Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam then allowed the Sahaba, wherever they found themselves, to marry women temporarily, and when they travel back home, to divorce those women. So the agreement is that you're entering into a temporary marriage. That was called mut'ah. However, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam thereafter prohibited mut'ah and said that it will not be permissible until the day of judgment. If a man enters into a marriage, you need to enter into a marriage with an intention of maintaining the marriage until he dies or his wife dies. Of course, if challenges come about within a marriage, then the law of divorce, but it cannot be prearranged. One cannot prearrange that my marriage is going to last for X number of days or weeks or months. Right? So Rasul Sallallahu prohibited the mut'ah. Another mut'ah that I wanted to clarify, because I said there are two mut'ahs in Islam. The second mut'ah is a very something that should be happening more within society. However, people are sometimes unaware, and sometimes even if they are aware, circumstances cause them not to implement the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to husbands that divorces their wives. Allah said to them, وَمَتِّعُهُنَّ عَلَى الْمُوسِعِ قَدَرُهُ وَعَلَى الْمُقْتِرِ قَدَرُهُ. When a man divorces his wife, Allah said the man must pay a mut'ah. In Ramadan, it's compulsory that he pays a mut'ah. And the mut'ah would be a monetary gift that a husband gives to his wife on the occasion of divorce. So the second mut'ah is legislated and compulsory and something that should be spoken about more, irrespective of what the circumstances may be on the occasion of divorce. But a mut'ah is something that the husband should give. The other mut'ah, which is a temporary marriage, is an example that I made now to show you how things within the development of the Sharia in the time of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, things were once upon a time permitted and then they became haram. The hadith here and is one such example. The hadith speaks about tatbiq. Right. Who heard of tatbiq before? The students of knowledge studying tatbiq in ruku'. So in the narrated the hadith from Al-Qamah, from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala an, that the messenger, that Sayyidina Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, إذا ركع أحدكم فليفرش ذراعيه وفخذيه وليجنع. He said that when one of you perform ruku', he should make ifrash of his arms and his legs. In other words, you stretch out your arms. When you're going to ruku', you're going to be spreading out your legs because you're stretching your legs, and you're spreading out your arms because your arms is reaching down to the area of your knees. So that's what he means by ifrash. Afrash yufrishu mean? Yani yubsat, to spread out something. No. While yajna, he should bend his back. Yajna means in his ruku' he should bend his back. Of course, we know that the minimum ruku' is that your back has to be bent. If you have average size arms, then the minimum ruku' is that your back must be so bent so much that your hands reach your knees. If I go bend my back so little that my hands can't reach my knees when I have average size arms, my ruku' is not better. Right? However, the complete ruku' is wal yajna, that your back should be straight. Bend down in such a way that your back is straight as far as possible. Then he said, ثُمَّ طَبَّكَ بَيْنَ كَفَّيْهِ فكأني أنظر إلى اختلاف أصابع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم تطبق. Then he said he made tatbiq. And he translated this from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And what tatbiq means is to gather your fingers of your hands together and then to place it not on your knees as we do today, but to place it between your knees, right? On the inside of your legs. Sorry, on your thighs, right? I'm not going to demonstrate, but I may ask somebody to demonstrate unless everyone understands what I'm conveying. The picture you're going into ruku, but instead of putting your hands on your knees, you put your hands in the inside of your legs. You're not putting hands on your knees in the inside of your legs. That is tatbiq. And that's how the Sahaba in the initial days used to perform ruku. And yeah, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is teaching it to his students. Um, a more detailed version of the same hadith speaks of two of the students of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud comes to his home. Now, there's also, again, the study of hadith gives you insight into history. I'm going to give a background to this narration at a later stage, but just listen what's happening. Two of his students come to his home. Then he makes those two students, he prays now Salatul Fajr with him. But he doesn't place them behind him, he places them on his side. أَصَلَّ هَؤُلَاءِ خَلْفَكُمْ, should they pray behind? He said no. قُومُوا فَصَلُّوا, they should stand next to him and pray with him. He did not ask him to make adhan, and he did not ask him to call out the iqamah, which are two sunnahs of salah. They're making fajr in his own, no adhan, no iqamah. And the two of them are standing on his side, they're not standing behind him. They should stand on his side, not both of them on one side. So they wanted to go to the back. أَخَذْ بِأَيْدِينَا, he took us by the hands, he placed one of us on his right, and he placed another on his left. So he had someone praying on his right and someone praying on his left, and he was praying in the center. Like one sof, he will be one step to the front, the one will be on his right, the one will be on his left. And then he said, the two students said, when we went into ruku, we placed our hands on our knees. So he moved our hands and he made us place our hands in our legs. And then he said, after he completed the Salatul Fajr, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that you will have bad leaders that will delay Salah out of its time. Right? So they will delay Salah until only such a little time remains for you to perform the Salah. يخلقونها إلى شرق الموتى. فإذا رأيتموهم قد فعلوا ذلك, the Prophet when you see your leaders doing this, delaying the Salah, either till out of its time or till just such enough time remains for you to pray the Salah, فصلوا الصلاة لميقاتها, then you make sure you pray the Salah in its prescribed time at the beginning of the waqt and in the waqt. And then when they pray their Salah, you pray with them again. وَجَعَلْ لُوا صَلَاتَكُمْ مَعَهُمْ سُبْحًا. Make your Salah with them. Subha means there's many lessons in this, right? I'm going to come back to it again. And then he said, وَإِذَا كُنْتُمْ ثَلَاثَ فَصَلُّوا صَفًّا وَإِذَا كُنْتُمْ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ فَلْيَؤُمَّكُمْ. And he said, when you're only three, again reiterating what he did with these two of his students, when you are three people, then pray in one row, someone on the right of the Imam, someone on the left, and the Imam slightly to the front. And if you're more than three, then the Imam stands in front, and the three plus they stand in a separate row behind the Imam. This is not our madhab, right? So you can't listen to this now and walk out, decide this is how my salah must be made. I'm just reading the hadith, relating the hadith. The discussion is still coming. The discussion is still coming. So that's the hadith that he transmits. Then he has some discussions around the Isnad, the chain of transmission. I'm not going to get into. I usually get into it on Sunday mornings. But most of the information regarding the Isnad may not be applicable to most of us present this morning. So I'm going to leave out the discussion of the Isnad. So he said that this lesson that Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud gives his students. So of course, this is now after the demise of Rasulullah. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is already in Iraq. It's after the time of Rasulullah, and he's teaching this to a group of his students then, right? And he said that this fatwa or this discussion, this lesson of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, with regards to tatbiq, placing your hands between your legs instead of on your knees, shows us that it's possible you can be a great scholar. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was of the greatest ulama that the world has seen, scholars that the ummah has produced, but he can be unaware of a ruling. He was unaware that his ruling changed, and he was still practicing on an old ruling, even though he was a great alim. Right? Now, even though he has a high status in knowledge, وَإِنْ كَانَ كَبِيرَ الْمَحَلْ فِي الْعِلْمِ, it's possible that you can be unaware of some ruling. And that's just a reality. There's no perfection when it comes to this deen except for Allah. Everyone else makes mistakes. Everyone else can be unaware of certain things. Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, he used to point to the grave of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he used to say, كُلٌّ يُؤْخَذْ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ وَيُرَدْ. Everyone you can take from what they say, you can reject what they say, except the person that whatever comes from him, you must accept. There's no, I accept certain things and I reject. Now, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud could have been unaware that this was placing your hands between your knees was abrogated. And it shows you how the greatest of ulama can be unaware of certain things. And therefore, I cannot have an attitude whereby I'm going to follow the position of one scholar and one scholar only. Even if it means I'm going to break up a community, even if it means I'm going to, because I just want to follow. No. Therefore, you have the idea of organizations and where scholars come together, and where there's debate and where there's discussion. And it's very important that you allow yourself to follow that which is true, the truth, not just the opinion of a teacher or the opinion of a school. Otherwise, you'll be restricting yourself. And this ties into the rawha that we had yesterday, after Asr class yesterday. When Dr. Bhuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, he made the example that from the being spoiled and rotten and bad is when I become rigid in following the view of one person to the detriment of society, to the detriment of my family. I'm not willing to budge. And I imagine that is deen, but it's not deen. All I'm doing is just following my hawa. And I made some examples in yesterday's dars, so I'm not going to make those examples again this morning. Tamam. How do we know this was abrogated? We know it was abrogated because of many other hadith. He said in the hadith of Sayyidina Sa'ad radiallahu ta'ala an kunna naf'aluhu, we used to place our hands between our legs. فَنُهِينَا عَنْ, and then we were prohibited from placing our hands between our legs. وَأُمِرْنَا بِالرُّكَبِ, and we were commanded to place our hands on our knees. That's how the ummah makes salah these days, today. Now, and when a Sahabi says we were prohibited, then it means the Prophet also prohibited us. And when the Prophet, a Sahabi says umirna, we were commanded, then it means the Prophet commanded us. So Sayyidina Sa'ad radiallahu anhu, he said that we used to place our hands between our legs, tatbiq, and then we were prohibited from doing that. We were commanded to place our hands on our knees. Another narration, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he said, Inna rukaba sunnat lakum. The sunnah is for you, the practice is for you to place your hands on your knees and not between your legs. And there are many other hadith that confirms this. So here you have an example again. Our Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the great Sahaba, was unaware that this ruling changed and that the Prophet also prohibited placing one's hands between his legs and that you should place your hands on your knees. Now another merit of this hadith is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is living now in Kufa. The governor of Kufa is Walid ibn Uqba. And these governors, they want always the best of people. And this was one of those persons that Rasulullah referred to, was that they would delay salah and pray it close to the time that the waqt leaves. Right? So what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud then did was, and the reason why this whole incident took place was, he showed us that even though the rule of delaying salah until the waqt almost leaves, or sometimes after the waqt leaves, it's still important to pray salah in its prescribed time at the beginning of the waqt. So what he did was he used to have a fajr in his home with some of his students, and after praying fajr in his home with some of his students, he would still leave home to go to the masjid to pray where the governor is, so that he doesn't break away from the jama'ah. Right? That's like really amazing. And that was the instruction of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu said, open for Shaykh. Sayyidina Abdullah quoted this from the words of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that you will have leaders that will delay salah from its time. If you see that, then pray salah at the beginning of its time, and then make your salah behind him a supererogatory salah. So the Prophet says, still pray behind him. Today, somebody has an issue with someone in the masjid. He don't come to the masjid. Someone bothering him in the masjid, he don't come to the masjid. Here the Prophet ﷺ, the person is delaying salah. That's a serious crime. But to maintain unity, the Prophet ﷺ saying, even though this person is delaying salah, you make your salah at home on time, but still go to the masjid and pray to maintain unity, that you're still standing together, even though the government is wrong. And then your salah behind him, subha, make it enough. Subha is detailed to why a nafil salah is called subha. I'm not going to get into that, but yes, subha means nafil. Make your salah behind the imam because it's a second salah, make it a nafil salah. And then in the case of many Muslims these days, you don't even need to make it a nafil salah, because so many Muslims have qada fajr that they must make. So they might not go pray again with the imam and not make it nafil, just make it a qada salah. Ajib. Also, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala an, he doesn't have the adhan called out in his own. Neither does he have the iqamah called out. And both of them are from the sunnah of salah. A sahabi doesn't leave out a sunnah which is so important. And from that, we should understand that even when I pray at home, the sunnah is for me to call the adhan. Whenever I make salah at home, and I don't make the adhan, I've left out the sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when I'm praying at home, I should call out the adhan. If I heard the adhan from the masjid, then the question come up, must I still call the adhan, yes or no? If I heard the adhan from the masjid and I had an intention that I may go to the masjid, I may not go, and I end up not going, then the adhan's masjid counts for me. But if from the very beginning I had no intention at all of going to the masjid, and the adhan at the masjid doesn't count for me, the sunnah, I must still call the adhan within my home. And if I never heard any adhan, then the sunnah still remains that I must call the adhan in my home. Why does Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud not call the adhan in his home for the Fajr Salah? Again, because he doesn't want to cause problems within the community. He was going to call the adhan, and people are going to hear the adhan, and then his neighbors come and make salah with him. It's going to cause a fitna. It's another Jew starting another jama'ah. So he never called the adhan, he never called the iqamah, so that nobody knows that he's making salah. Why? So it doesn't create a fitna within the society. Look at the ashab of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And someone will say, no, but you must stand up for justice. And you must stand up against oppression. And Sayyidina Abdullah Mas'ud doesn't know about justice, doesn't know about oppression. Sayyidina Abdullah Mas'ud is hakim. Sayyidina Abdullah Mas'ud is wise. He knows when it's time to stand up and when it's time to let things go. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised over here that what? You make salah on time, and then go make salah with him again, and your second salah will be enough. No. Right? The Sahaba of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam were people of wisdom. Thereafter, the second challenge with the narration of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the way he had the young men, his students, stand, one on his right and one on his left. He said, if you're three, you stand in one row with the imam slightly to the front, and only when you're more than three do you create a second row. Right? And his practice, either one on the right, one on the left, or two on the right, supports the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And Abu Hanifa said that if there's two people praying with the Imam, then they should stand on his right. So two people stand on his right, and the Imam is one step to the front. When the Imam is just one step to the front, they count it as one saf, not as two safs. He's just one step to the front, they just like one saf, two to his right. And when there's three people behind the Imam, they must create their own saf behind the Imam. So the Imam stands alone in the saf, and the three stand behind the Imam. This practice here of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud supports the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. In fact, most of the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa comes from Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And Abu Hanifa studied under who? Was this teacher Abu Hanifa? Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, I think it is. I think that's the name, but the name for some reason is sounding funny to me. Right? Who narrated from who? I think it was from Ibrahim al-Nakhai, from Al-Qama, from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Most of the fiqh of Abu Hanifa comes from the teacher Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, from Ibrahim al-Nakhai, from Al-Qama, or Aswad, from Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And here you can see here's an example of how the practice of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud became the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Ash-Shafi'i says, however, this is another instance where Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud wasn't aware of other narrations when the Prophet explained how people should be standing in Salah. What narrations? The famous narration that comes in Sahih Muslim of Sayyidina Jabir radiallahu ta'ala an, who said that I prayed Salah with Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and I stood on his left. So what did Rasul do? The Prophet took me by the hand, he pulled me by my back, and then he took me over the other hand and pulled me till I stood on his right. So first of all, if I pray with the Imam, I should stand in one person behind. If there's only one person with the Imam, meaning you two, then you stand on the right of the Imam with the Imam just one step ahead of you. He then said, he's now standing on the right. ثم جاء جبار بن صخر. And Jabbar ibn Sakhar came, and he came to stand on the left of Rasulullah. That's not how Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was praying. And then he said, Rasulullah then took him by his hand and took me by my hand, and he pushed us both to the back until we stood in our own saf behind Rasulullah, and there were only two. And that's the Shafi'i school, is that if there's two people behind the Imam, two people stand behind him in a different row and not next to him. If there's one person, you stand next to him on the right. If there's two people, you stand behind him. La ilaha illallah. In another hadith transmitted by Bukhari and Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala, Ibn ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala an, he invited Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to his house. Why? Why did he want the Prophet to come to his house? He wanted Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to make salah in a place in his home, one corner of his room, that he can take as a place of salah. Barakah from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's all he wanted. If you read the seerah of the Sahaba, the concept of taking barakah, and you find it all over from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in everything. He wants the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's making salah in his home. Salah is for Allah. And he's between the slave and Allah. There's nothing between the slave and Allah making salah. But the Sahaba is worried about something else. He says, Ya Rasul, make salah in one place, so that my place where I worship Allah becomes the same place. From your barakah. Right? You do that today, they say shirk. Where's the shirk of the Sahaba? And then the Prophet doesn't only, the Prophet entertains it. The Prophet acknowledges that if you're going to make salah in a place where I pray, there's going to be barakah. Like inside Habib Umar was now one of our recent dawras in Krama. Habib came, Munadi Lawar came with a new musalla to throw it out in the mihrab, so that for the entire duration Habib was praying salah on his musalla. So he takes it home with him, he has a musalla, so he prayed. And then also Sayyid Habib Umar's wife was with him, Baba Noor. And Habib Umar's wife is a waliya, right? She's a wali of Allah. She has like her own da'wah, her own programs, her own everything, independent from Sayyid Habib. And she was the daughter of the great Habib Muhammad bin Abdullah al-Addar, one of the teachers of Habib Umar. And subhanAllah, when she came with Habib Umar to Cape Town a few years ago, there were so many lessons to take from her. One of the things she did, this is an attitude of a wife towards her husband. The Dawra, the retreat we had was in the Kramat Masjid. And one day when she came past the masjid and there was no men in the masjid except for a handful of men, she told the sisters to see if there's any men in the masjid. She told there's only a handful. She said that asked them to leave. So they chased the youngsters out of the masjid. And she came into the masjid because she wanted to pray on the musalla that said Habib Umar, her husband, was leading salah. She wanted barakah from her own husband. And she prayed a few rak'ats of salah and was the place where you made salah, and then she went back to accommodation. Subhanallah. Whose wife here wants to pray in the place where you pray? Subhanallah. So the point here is that Itban ibn Malik wants Rasulullah to pray in his home so that he can take that as a place of salah. Who is with Rasulullah? Sayyidina Abu Bakr. The Prophet comes to visit him with the Prophet is Sayyidina Abu Bakr. That's another common thing in the seerah. The Prophet came with him was Abu Bakr. The Prophet went with him was Abu Bakr. The Prophet sat with him was Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu made mulazimah tamma of Rasulullah. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr is with him. So the Prophet also wants to know, where do you want me to make salah in your home? Because the Prophet must not choose a place that will become the place of his salah. So he says, over there, Ya Rasulullah. So the Prophet goes, and the Prophet stands to make salah, and the Prophet says that Itban and Sayyidina Abu Bakr must stand behind him in their own row. He doesn't say on my right, he doesn't say one on my right, one on my left. He says, both of you behind me. And that shows that even if there's two people behind the Imam, praying with an Imam, that they must stand in a independent, separate row. No. So the question then comes up, was Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud unaware of this practice of Rasulullah? Was he not unaware? Al-Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that it's possible that when Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had a student on his right and a student on his left and led the salah like that and not letting the two of them stand in an independent row behind him, it may have been that he was just illustrating that this way is also permissible. Because all ways are permissible. It's just a matter of what is preferable. And what is preferable is for two to stand behind the Imam in an independent row. However, if they were to stand one on the right and one on the left, then that will also be permissible. So Imam Nawawi's view that he adopts is that Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud in all probability did it this way just to illustrate that it is permissible, not that it is the preferred way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The hadith, of course, also establishes another important lesson, and that is, we already in our previous discussions here on a Sunday, we said that a person can perform a compulsory salah behind someone who's making a nafil salah. We covered that. There's a hadith that showed how it's permissible. Maybe someone can be praying a sunnah salah, and I can pray a farz salah. Where that becomes very practical is Taraweeh for those persons that have qada salah to make. The Imam can be reading Salat al-Taraweeh, but the person following can be making qada of Salah that he missed. If it's qada of Fajr, it's easy. Fajr is 2 rak'ahs, Taraweeh is 2. So instead of making the niyyah of Taraweeh behind the Imam, he makes the niyyah of a qada of Fajr Salah, which is preferred by them. If it's Fajr Salah, any Salah that I miss, then it's preferred for me to make qada my salah before I make any sunnah salah. To make qada of fard salah that I miss, compulsory prayers that I miss, rather than making sunnah salah. Right? But to maintain some structure within a masjid, if you're going to be making qada salah behind the Imam of Taraweeh, make the qada fajr. Otherwise, it's going to be chaotic. If a few people, that's not a problem, but imagine you have a masjid with the Imam, "Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah," and everyone is making qada of dhuhr behind you that they must, so everyone stands up there. Who's going to recite the pujis if that happens? So, if it's Fajr Salah, you must make qada of your Fajr. So it's permissible to make a compulsory Salah behind a person for making a Sunnah Salah. This hadith establishes that you can make a Sunnah Salah behind someone who's making a compulsory Salah. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, make Salah again with the ruler when he makes Salah, which is his Farz Salah, but you make a Sunnah Salah behind. Naam. You can make only two intentions. It depends what salahs you want to do. Taraweeh and Fard Salah, no, you can't. Tahiyyatul Masjid and Fard Salah, yes, I can. It's a discussion. Certain prayers are legislated in different ways. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just wants a salah to be made, not any specific salah. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislates a specific salah. The scholars refer to maqsuda and ghair maqsuda. So I can, if a specific salah is not intended, like the greeting of a masjid for salah, is not a specific salah that's intended. Allah wants any salah to be performed. And if you have no salah to perform, then make tahiyyatul masjid. So the tahiyyatul masjid is not a specifically intended prayer. What is intended by Allah is make any salah when you enter into the masjid. So I can join a non-specified prayer like tahiyyatul masjid with my 2 rak'ahs before the, or with my door salah, or with, but Taraweeh is specifically intended. My Fard Salah is specifically intended. I can't take two specifically intended prayers into one. It takes time to appreciate what I'm conveying, but in short, no, I cannot make Fajr and Taraweeh. So this hadith shows that you can make a sunnah salah behind someone that is making a compulsory salah. The hadith also indicates to the fact, Ibn Abdul Bar took this from the hadith, that a person that intentionally leaves out a salah must make qada of the salah. Dawood al-Zahiri, Hazm al-Zahiri, the Zahiri mother, had the view that if a person intentionally leaves out a salah, there's no qada for that salah. Right? However, all the madhaib al-arba and the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, every single one of them said that that is batil. With an exception to someone like Ibn Taymiyyah who adopted the Zahiri madhab over here, the scholars spoke out against him vehemently on this. On what? If you intentionally leave out the salah, they say there's no qada. Ibn Abdul Bar said this is one of the hadith that establishes qada is compulsory. Because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in the hadith that whoever oversleeps from a salah, man nama an salati, or nasiyaha, or he forgets to make salah, فليصلي إذا ذكرها, he should make the salah when he remembers, when he wakes up. That's the concept of qada. So they said that if you left it out intentionally, the Prophet never mentioned that. The Prophet said you oversleep and you forget. When you remember, make qada. And if you leave it out intentionally, they said you don't have to make qada. All the ulama said you must make qada. If you must start the salah, it's an obligation that comes into your dhimma. When Fajr enters, the obligation of Fajr enters into my dhimma. My dhimma is like a cloud that's on my shoulders. And the only way I free myself from that obligation by fulfilling the obligation. How do I intentionally not do what the obligation is fulfilled? My dhimma becomes clear. The mother says to her children that these dishes must be washed before midnight. Right? So they wash it before midnight. I say no, but if they forget to wash it before midnight, then they must wash it. But if they intentionally didn't wash it before midnight and the clock goes beyond midnight, then they have to wash it. I must say to that. And any person's mind won't accept such an argument. How does this hadith indicate that you must make qadha of a salah even if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yeah, that even if the leader is delaying salah till out of its waqt, you make salah in its waqt, and when the leader decides to make salah, you make salah with him. Now, why would the Prophet be telling you to make salah with him? One thing is unity. Another thing is because the salah is still going to be valid. If the salah was not valid, if you first of all, it's going to be qadha. And when you're making qadha, the Prophet is indicating that the qadha is valid. If there was no such thing as qadha for a prayer that you are intentionally, then the prayer shouldn't be done. Why would the Prophet be telling you to go make a salah that's not valid? It's a roundabout argument that they come with. If you got that, alhamdulillah. But it suffices in that sense, what suffices is that all the people and all century after century held the view without any debate, except for a handful of people, that the interpretation of hadith was very problematic. The Zahiri mother's interpretation of hadith was very problematic. The vast majority of the Ummah, all of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah said that even if you leave out the prayer intentionally, you must make qadha. And that's something we must take very serious. If I have prayers that I have not performed, I should try to calculate how many prayers it was as best as I can. I need to estimate that I became mukallaf when I was 14 years old. And I was irregular in making salah, or I never made salah until I hit a certain age. 18, so 4 years I never made salah. And then I need to calculate how much salah I missed, and I need to keep a record of it and pay in my salah. أول ما يحاسب به العبد يوم القيامة, the first thing that must be questioned on the day of judgment is salah. No. And that all comes from the hadith that I also covered this morning. The next one was qunut. I thought we were going to cover qunut as well. But it's really salat al-duha. The ishraq prayer? No. So we have to leave qunut for next week, inshallah. تقبل الله يا كريم. So now if someone asks you what is tatbiq in ruku, you tell him tatbiq is what tatbiq is, and the fact that it has been abrogated. And it also gives you into insight how the Sharia at times existed in one way and then changes came about. That change, however, cannot happen again after Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah make us from the students of deen and the students of knowledge. May Allah connect us to the one who uttered these words, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah grant us steadfastness in walking His path and following His way. And may this become our objective in life. Our objective is to please Allah. The only way I can please Allah is following His Rasul. May this objective that is so clear and simple become our mi'yar. What's a mi'yar? Our gauge by which we take every decision in life. Every decision should be taken in light of pleasing Allah by following the way of Rasul. بهذه النوايا أيضا أسأل صالح وسيد الحبيب عمر وإلى حضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم الفاتحة. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين صراط الذين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين. نعم بسم الله.